Hi, Sachin.
Hey, Dinkar.
It's been a while. I think first I went on vacation, then you went on vacation, and then almost all of India went on vacation.
Yes, absolutely.
But during this period, we had few conversations around metrics, outcome metrics, productivity metrics of teams. And recently, there have been a lot of asks about our opinion and recommendations around metrics for individuals.
Yeah.
And, this is something that I'm always little wary of when an exec says that I want to uh, measure my developer. Though the stated reason is always we want to figure out where they are struggling, where they are performing, and offer them help. But when you measure something, then you want to improve that. And many times I have seen and I worry that it may immediately come down to developer A is not doing well in this, and and it kind of circles down on an individual rather than work at the team level towards achieving an output. So I
Yeah.
think this whole discussion on volumetric versus value metric is something that we have talked a lot, but let's dive down again today in this podcast, so we can share our views with others and hear what they have to say. So let me start with this. You become what you measure.
Hmm.
So what's your experience on organizations who are trying to measure volumetric um, metrics for a developer, what it does to the culture, what it does to the developer, what it does to the team? What's been your experience?
Yes. And Dinkar, you rightly said this is a very close topic which associated with the culture. And when execs are talking about it, I would like to also step back a little bit and think and address that elephant in the room, right? Is why they are even thinking about this. And if you have noticed, lately we are talking to execs who are asking this.
Right.
This has been always, but suddenly the number of requests have jumped up. And I believe partly it is happening due to the hybrid work environments. Earlier, you and I used to work very closely, and it was not very difficult for you to figure out what am I doing, how much time I'm spending on doing something.
I used to keep
Uh,
a logbook. Sachin stood up,
Correct.
Sachin went to restroom. Yeah.
Yeah. But even jokes apart, the feeling that I could see in my vicinity, my 10 team members are doing certain things, and I can just observe it, gives a lot of confidence about something. It was very difficult to hide behind a rock, particularly if your organization is like ThoughtWorks, where you have a flatter workspaces, that there are no cubicles and walls, and you can't hide in a corner. But today, there are a couple of problems which are exacerbating this thing. Is A, we are working almost remotely, and you have no visibility into what I'm doing, where am I spending my time, and I'll talk the subsection of it. But the second thing I'll get to first is, and the other thing which is causing this is a lot of people, like even I struggled with it in the beginning, is we are not super organized, or we are not super efficient in terms of our communication with this hybrid environment with our team, that this is what I'm doing, this is what I mean, we are still working, many of us are still working as if it is like the non-hybrid era, where I mean, Dinkar should know what I'm doing, or Dinkar knows what I'm doing. This implicit expectation is also causing that problem. So these are two major reasons which I believe are uh, like creating that suspicion mindset into leaders, that they believe a lot of things are not moving in the right direction, And am I actually having people working and giving their best to my things? And the talent cost has gone through the roof, so they want to optimize this as much as possible. So I get it. It's a genuine ask, it's a genuine concern. But often in the context of software development, because that is what you and I are good at, we don't know rest of the industry, is the culture of openness and trust and collaboration is super important for us to achieve the creative output which we typically are expected to generate. Unless you and I are, let's say, working on a system or a process which is extremely volume oriented, like example, you and I are in customer support and we need to resolve a certain number of tickets per day. Otherwise, there will be a backlog generated, which will take long time or more people to address. Or you and I are into publishing, where certain number of stories you and I need to process through editorial. And if we don't do that, then this will not actually go live. The newspaper won't get published. So we are, if you are into that time constraint mode, where your volume of output is extremely critical, by all means, please do that. We are not even talking about that. It's justified there. Right. But when we are talking about these creative endeavors, where you are creating a software screen or mobile app or a feature, where there are 15 ways to do this. I can actually implement it sloppily. I can implement it in an optimal way. I can implement it in a over-engineered manner as well. Yeah. That it's not even needed. Here, the effort required to achieve something varies greatly, and there is no way I can even measure it. So these volumetric measurements, whether it is how many commits Sachin committed today, or how many lines of code was written, these all kind of metrics will be, I would say, indicating a false sense of security in leaders that something is being achieved. But they will struggle heavily to link that to show demonstrable progress on the business side. Right. And that is what is the challenge. But we can unpack it a little bit more. So, Dinkar, I also now want to ask you a couple of questions. Let's say that people are wanting to get answers to this productivity thing. What level of like in this hybrid world, what does productivity even mean? Is it like still as the old times where you and I are just churning out features and stories and making things, or something else has creeped up into people's days that these leaders are getting worried?
I think actually this is coming from a very good change. But how this change is, people are trying to understand, is very much from old methods, because that is the reference they have, right? So the positive change that has come is that now a lot of leaders are not worrying about what's happening in the office. There are so many details that they don't have to worry about, because employees are to a large extent self-sufficient in their home office, small office, right? So a lot of those things are now away, right? And as I talk to the executives and leaders, right, I feel that there is more focus on outcome than before, because now people are saying that, I am not getting distracted by these earlier small nitty-gritties that I used to get distracted while I was in the office. I'm sitting now and I don't have to worry about these small, busyness of taking care of these many things. Now I can focus on what are we achieving. Okay, we are achieving things, and we are achieving things at certain pace. How can I improve it, right? Because the executives themselves are now genuinely focused on outcomes.
Yeah.
rather than these small active volumetric things, right? But now they want to increase the outcome, they want to improve, they want to increase the value. So what kind of things they should do in their teams to increase it, right? Earlier, I could see someone go up and go to, let's say, restroom a lot, and I'll wonder how much time does a team member spend in restroom. And that's why a lot of companies started, you step out of the floor, you have to swipe your cards. There's one story of a organization who had actually invested in a pilot of putting an IoT device under a chair, which used to measure how much time someone is sitting, right? They were doing all of these because in their mind, activity implied outcome. Now they have no idea what activity is happening, right? They're seeing outcome. The only thing in front of them is the outcome. So they're focusing on outcome. That's good. But in order to improve the outcome, what do I have to do? I fall back because we don't have the new paradigms on how to increase the outcome of a team, how to focus on the value generated by the team. We still don't have those metrics. We still don't have that mindset. So what do? We try to figure out, maybe the team is not that much focusing on activities. Maybe if I help them improve their involvement in activities, the value will increase, right? So they are having a good outcome in mind, a good goal in mind, right? Rather than going and measuring people, they're focusing on outcome, but they don't have the tools on how to handle the other side of it, what kind of changes to bring in the team. And in absence of those, they're falling back on these and they're trying to double click on it, right? So every exec who has reached out and said, hey, I want to measure this, you've been in some of those conversations, I say, why do you want to do it? What's the intention? And I feel that they genuinely say that when they're saying it, they genuinely mean it. I want to help people who are struggling, unless I don't know which, because now the developers are also kind of disconnected from each other. So I may not know what kind of challenge someone else is facing, right? So they want to figure out, hey, what's your challenge? How can I help you? They want to help this struggling developer, but unless they don't have a view into that developer's metrics, they won't be able to know where to help. And in absence of very good outcome metrics, they fall back on the same set of things. And I think that is what is driving this
Yeah,
conflict.
Dinkar, you actually stated a very good issue. Then in my mind, the challenge seems to be that people are not aware of what things are happening, who is struggling. And you know what? Sometimes complex problem has very simple solutions. So in my mind, if I would like to highlight that who is struggling, if that is the real issue, and you are not focused on identifying like the black sheep from the herd, right? Then probably you should focus on implementing the practices which are for last 2 decades working if you implement them effectively. Example is a good stand-up. When you are doing stand-ups, you are not supposed to run them like status meetings.
Right.
And there is a way in which you are supposed to conduct these meetings. In terms of if you think about most of these companies, they run their stand-ups as status meetings.
Yeah.
The boss is actually asking and saying, hey, tell me the status. So maybe that is one change which should be looked at. The second thing which I also feel is you should start making more collaborative efforts. And today, luckily, we have a lot of tools which can help you do that. Example is in ThoughtWorks, we use these Zoom breakout rooms for pairing, where a team logs in the morning, and what they are doing is they are for a whole day just like being in the pairing sessions, and by doing that, they are essentially allowing people to walk into any of the like pairs rooms or go to these common huddle rooms and work as if it is a physical workspace.
I agree with you. I think, and some of our colleagues are working on this. I think a lot of these implicit practices probably need to be formalized. I mean, there is, some people call it Agile 2.0, some people call it distributed Agile, some people call it asynchronous Agile. But I think we need to come up with new set of practices, ways
Right.
of working, which is addressing this. Either you call it remote first, you call it all remote, you call it hybrid. But I think the outcome of this, whatever, even if everyone is in office, this focus on outcome, focus on value is a very good change. And depending upon your team, how they are distributed, how they are located, maybe some of those practices may change. You may apply whatever, but I think that is very important. And coming back to the comment that you made earlier, maybe people don't know what those ways are, what those metrics are, right? And maybe at some point we should have some discussion on that also in course of this one, on what our recommendation around those metrics are. But I want to ask one question before we go there, right? We are operating in the space of best of intentions. That's the underlying assumption in all the conversation we had till now. How do we protect a developer from being looked at using these metrics as performance review, and are you the weakest link? How do we make sure that it doesn't, is there some guards we can put, or do you have any thoughts, or do you feel that the metrics that we talk about a lot inherently protect a developer from that?
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts on that. And this is going back to that culture aspect, which you started with, is how you can create one policy and suddenly the whole culture of the organization can get colored by that. Example is, do you remember Foursquare? Have you ever used that tool?
Yeah, Foursquare. Yeah, if you call it a tool, I didn't think of it as a tool, but yeah, sure.
No, the app.
Okay,
I
sure.
meant that.
Yeah.
The deal with Foursquare, and I and my team members used to use Foursquare. What I realized is that our group was very competitive with each other on Foursquare and number of chickens. And we used to fight and go to those same tea shops and same lunch places to claim the mayorship of that place. And sometimes I didn't even want to eat that food, like the parathas, right? But then I was like very close to claim the mayorship, and then that used to influence my decision to go to that restaurant and eat the food, despite I wanted to do something else. My story is applicable everywhere. Is we are competitive in nature, many of us are, and if you give me a metric and you like show me that is a target metric for me, where you will measure me, like in case of Foursquare, it used to see how many times you visit a place and then declare that you are the mayor of that place. It was just a virtual stupid badge. But it was very important to me, right? Because it gave me that status within my group, peer group. The same thing happened when GitHub announced Insights. In my team, we used to measure how many lines were added by somebody. So when we did commits, my team members used to do small commits sometimes. And then we used to like say, hey, but you won on commits, but look at that, I actually added more code. Now, it's all fair when you are doing this for just stupid laughs. But what if an engineering leader thinks that I need to measure Sachin by these number of lines written or number of commits made? The challenge is you will influence how people behave.
Right.
And there is a Goodhart's law for that. The economist in 1950s said that if you create a metric as your measurement, as a target, suddenly the value of that measurement is completely off.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't do that as much as possible. The challenge is that how do I not tell and start measuring that? The better thing is you measure abstract. For example, you measure how much is technical debt being generated in the code base. How many times a person is causing a bill to be failed.
Right.
Because that tracks discipline, that tracks quality. You should actually think about how many, how they, if you estimated something, how what is the lead time for that story? If Sachin made, it takes to go to production. If I am writing good test, that means my basically testing will actually become in the optimal time.
Right.
And then after that, it will go to production without any hiccups. So essentially, you just link everything together. That's a good way to measure what is my quality of my output. And then obviously, you should also think about measuring business outcomes. Like a team was working on certain stories to achieve a business outcome. Did they achieve it or not as a group, not as an individual, but as a group? And that would be a good way to measure. If you measure these number of commits, number of defects, number of lines of code written, and all those things, I have seen these things create very toxic culture in the companies. Unhealthy competition, essentially.
Yeah, I think other than toxic, they also, if they're not creating toxic in some teams, that doesn't mean that everything is okay. I've seen people chase local optimas, right?
Yeah.
Within this, I'll hack something and I'll make sure that these metrics always look good, right? And that's what is scary about univariate kind of metrics. I do this and then I start getting good results here. And that kind of drives this kind of behavior. And one of the things that we think a lot about when we are thinking of a metric is always make sure it's multivariate, right? Means a lot of variables need to fall into place for this single metric to move. And
Correct.
if we take that from a team level to an individual level, right? We say, hey, individual developer, this is how your outcome is going to get measured. But in order to achieve that outcome, we know, because it's such a multivariate relationship, that your discipline should be good, your communication with the team should be good, your understanding of what you're trying to achieve should be good, your understanding of how to measure the outcome of what you achieve is good. A lot of things have to fall into place, and then this will move. So that motivates someone to be a well-rounded, well-thinking developer, rather than just go in some direction, go deep there, become this local optima generating developer, and then look good in the mid, right? There's this, I used to hear this, right? In order to know who you are, I do measurements, but the flip side is ultimately you become what you measure, and it kind of robs a developer of all the possibilities of the lateral thinking they can do, the 4 or 5 step ahead kind of thinking they can do, the focus on business outcomes they can have, if you give them a bunch of these univariate metrics and say that this is how I'm going to measure you, whatever be my intention.
Correct. And I feel the tools are also matured in the space now. If you think about collaboration tools in terms of like, I know what you feel about some of the tools, but Dinkar, I'm talking about the class of tools which provide you ability to now work very closely with your teammates. Example is Slack, example is chat, example is Zoom, example is Teams, example is your even like on the go. Like our tools on the phone are so mature that you don't need to be like stuck into a cubicle to be productive. You can pick up calls, you can actually move things around. And what I am thinking is going back to your point about there has to be ways of working established by a team, and they need to think it in the new light, how they can apply these tools effectively for their own workflows, so that this transparency issue can be addressed very well. That now we can restore the trust, which is sort of like missing. Second is bring visibility and transparency at the leadership level, where you generate these tools. One of the tools which you and I are working on as well is to bring that visibility at the leadership level, that they can see the impact of work which is being done by the teams, and generate these evidence-based interventions with the team, rather than just like find a random metric and say, I want you to be done that. I mean, recently that one of the largest company acquisitions which we are in the know, right? Some funny things are coming out, like 50 pages of code was printed and then everybody was up for review, and then later they scrapped that idea. But the point is, I question what is the efficacy of these methods. So people need to change their ways of working to these modern standards.
On the tool side, what I was kind of reacting to is there are these tools now that a lot of execs are liking, that give you very, they give you a very, you can double click, you can go down, and you can, the assumption there is that with all the details and all the permutations, combinations, slicing, dicing, the assumption is that there is this root cause, this mythical root cause of a problem, and you will slice it this way, you'll dice it, then you'll add this data, and then you'll focus on this person and this, and you will find that root cause. And if you solve that root cause, everything else is okay. And what I think people not realizing is that the days of, the thought process that there is a root cause, a singular root cause to a lot of problems, that's not the reality. The root causes, it's always a bunch of reasons in a variety of places. And all of them have to be thought of, all of them have to be looked in a very holistic manner. And I don't mean like the new age holistic, not that I am trying to disrespect that term, but not in like, experiential way, holistic. Holistic, what I'm trying to say is that it's multivariate. There's so many different, right? It's on a grid of all the possibilities. It's not a sparse metric. It's quite a well-populated matrix, right? So you have to go and look at so many places. So these tools that allow you to go deep, this, I want to know this, on this day, what happened. They give you all these capabilities, but they give you a false sense of accomplishment of having found the root cause. And I think that is what I don't like about these tools.
Yeah, and some of these things are also very time dependent, and they are very ephemeral. They are not persistent. But these type of tools which keep this volumetric thing may make it persistent. I'll give you an example. Is I was one of the first developers onto one of the product which I built. And by virtue of that, what you get is you are able to create the app at the beginning, right? And when I created Rails new app, and then suddenly it populated like 200 files, and 200 files with a lot of code. Suddenly my first commit was about, let's say, 13,000 lines or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but something very huge. So the total lines of code committed for me was very high for a long time. Whereas some of these developers are continuously churning out features, and I was the also the founder, so I knew that this is the cheat which I have implemented in the beginning. But that became a permanent record for me. And that, like, I'll give you another example. What if, like, I'm on a team and they are measuring these things, and let's say I just had a misunderstanding about a feature. And I started working on something, and I had to retract my steps back, which is very common scenario. Everybody has done this multiple times during their life. Now, I would have taken, let's say, 5 days to do something which require only 1 day. But since I went 2-3 days into development, I came back to you and you said, Sachin, the feature was supposed to be done differently. It was my misunderstanding, which you should allow me to do that. I went back, fixed it, everything done. And now suddenly that particular commit is now 5 days. If you see this 2 months later, it will appear that I was slacking in that time.
Exactly. And that manager who's doing that analysis will say, bingo, I found the right cause. And then
Correct.
there will be a meeting to discuss that. And there will be dig out the old stuff to do that. And that's a totally loss of focus.
And it's something which is not even going to add a lot of value to your output.
Exactly.
And by the way, I'm not trying to undermine the reason why they want to do that. I
Right.
do understand that. I do believe it's a need. This comfort needs to be there. But the solution is different. It is a painful one. It is implement more transparency and trust in your team, despite people are hybrid and you can't see them working. Second is increase your communication with the team by ways in which you are not adding more meetings to their calendar, but making meetings effective. And the third thing I would request them to do is create these ways of working for these new tools, which allows them to effectively track these things, bring visibility to the leadership and the whole team as well. That's the right thing to do. And I do believe that has been the rule for like last 20 years. Nothing changed here.
Yeah. So Sachin, let me ask you this, the crux of this whole discussion. What are your favorite metrics for productivity of a team that you feel will be a good way to look at a developer and say that this is where you're doing good, this is where you need help? So what are your favorite recommendations?
In my mind, top things come is basically you should look at how the team is working on building secure code. Like when they are running these, like adding code to the project, how secure is that code? Are there any static warnings which are coming out? There are many automated ways to do it. A second is what kind of code they are writing in terms of, is the quality of the code better? Are they leaving the code base better than they touched it? Example is technical debt, cyclomatic complexity, the software design they are creating. Are they just adding code to existing methods and even like making them difficult to understand for later people? All those type of things.
So between all of these, right, you mentioned cyclomatic complexity, you measure take debt. Do you have one singular favorite one that you feel reflects this aspect the best? If you had to pick.
I think, and the last one I earlier also alluded is that lead time of my features which go to production. But it will be lead time, I would say, if I want to pick one. That will indicate holistically. It's an abstract metric. It is very difficult for me to actually game it. I cannot just magically appear my commits into production. So I would like to know how well is my commit that it can traverse fast. If you are writing bad code, it will not pass into your CI environments well. It will keep failing into tests. QAs will have difficult time. Then it will go back and forth in development and QA cycles. Then in UAT, it will struggle. And then eventually it will take a long time to go to production. So I think if I want to pick one metric, I would be trying to figure out if I have to go to individual level. Ideally, lead time also should be measured at team. But if you want to measure individual productivity, I would say lead time for an individual is a good metric to figure out.
So I think you misunderstood my question a bit. I was talking about within the three examples that you gave of tech debt, cyclomatic complexity, and that. But I think lead time is also a good one. So till now you have identified three. The security warnings is a very interesting one. Lead time, again, a very good one. And these translate well from a team to an individual. And the third one, I think you mentioned tech debt. So these three, are these three enough, or do you have few more that?
Actually, tech debt is a class of things. So tech debt
Okay.
comes at the top, and then there are like many small subsets of these metrics, like psychometric complexity,
Which
which I
actually
mentioned.
which is good, right? That means that tech debt is a multivariate metric.
Yes, it is.
A lot of things need to fall into place. It's meta in that way, and it's a derived metric in that way. Yeah.
Correct. And lead time also is similar. A lot
Similar.
of things will need to happen correctly to make sure that the lead time is good. Um, and this is also part of that DORA thing, right? With the 4 key metrics. So we are just borrowing the leaf and then saying that for individual, this lead time will be effective as well. So think about it that way.
Sure. So now that you mentioned DORA, DORA has three others, which I think make a lot of sense for a team. But if I hear you right, the ones that translate best from a team to individual, you want to recommend, because we don't want to recommend too many of them. Lead time is probably the best one to pick among all of those.
Correct. And the rest of the 3 DORA metric, right? Example is deployment frequency, how frequently your team is deploying code into production.
That's obviously a team thing.
Yes, you can't actually do that on an individual one. The change fill percentage, which is talking about how many times you pushed a change into production and it caused a degradation in the service. Now, attributing the root cause of that to individual is very difficult. And also it will be bad because you will be promoting defensiveness into the team. So
Right.
I wouldn't recommend that. And the last thing is mean time to restore. But rarely an individual will be able to control that. There are more things involved in that. So that's why the other 3 from 4 key metrics, which is deployment frequency, change fill percentage, and mean time to restore, I don't see that relating or like coming down to an individual, but lead time, I do believe it can come down.
So Sachin, among the 7 that we recommend to people a lot for their team, the one you have not covered is build failure rate. Do you think that is should stay with the team, or do you think that can come down to the level of individual in a productive manner?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. Yes, we should do that. The build failure rate is typically measured in a development environment, and it is a good indication of how disciplined your team is. So if I am committing code which goes into an integration environment, it should say that, okay, Sachin ran the build earlier or not. But I would not say this is my most favorite metric. This indicates overall team's discipline, but it could also blame an individual falsely because somebody else, because a continuous integration server picks up a bunch of changes in one go. Okay. It rarely actually like running one single commit at a time. So unless you are able to do that, like every commit is individually tested in isolation on a successful build, and if you can create this kind of scenario again and again and again, then yes, by all means. But otherwise, I would not recommend because like 5 developer commits can actually go into one build, and if the build fails, typically teams do an analysis of like what change caused that failure. So I wouldn't recommend that for individuals.
Makes sense. So let me summarize. Of the 7 that we recommend for teams, 3 of them translate very well for an individual because they're multivariate. They cannot be gamed, or conversely, they won't end up creating a local optima. And they reflect a lot of good things being done by a developer for these metrics. And the ones you recommended are security warnings, lead time, and tech debt. This makes it, Sachin, this makes it very real. It makes it very tangible, because I feel many times people say that don't do this, but very rarely people come out and talk about, okay, do this with the same kind of conviction, passion, and research and thought given to it. So I'm happy that while in this, I don't know how long we have been talking, while in these X number of minutes, we did talk a lot about what could go wrong if you're
Yeah.
focusing too much on volumetric metrics, if you focus on an individual, what all could go wrong. But on the other side, if you focus on these things, then you will accomplish what you want to accomplish. Help a developer become a better developer.
Yes.
Instead of creating an environment where there is toxic competition, or a person may feel singled, or convert these metrics from leading to a better value to a performance review. So I think this was a good conversation, and
Yes.
It's been a while since we had talked about metrics. We had taken the detour of assets, and I'm happy we had this discussion. Maybe we should come back to the discussion of assets sometimes later.
Yes,
So,
we should.
Thanks, Sachin.
Thank you so much, Dinkar. This was fun.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.